The Brain Dispenser.
We good. Greetings and welcome to a new episode of The Brain Dispenser. I am your host, Steve Guns, and I come to you once again from my living room where I have just had some fried eggs and Irish whiskey for dinner. There's no good reason why you should want to know that, but I just said it because I can. And tonight, I have underrated albums for you. That's right, criminally underrated albums by great artists. Albums that have been left just like the leftovers at a buffet. The food that nobody wanted to eat, that nobody wanted to feed off of. Except these are actually good, unlike the buffet at the Golden Corral or whatever. This food tastes great. It's more like Christmas leftovers that taste better the morning after when you're hungover. But these records are delicious no matter if you're drunk, sober, or hungover. As last week with the bands that you've never heard of, I got a playlist for you where I have put a couple songs from each of these delicious albums for you to listen to, and some songs that I feel like maybe represent the best of the records. So maybe you can get a preview of all of them, but I highly encourage you to check them out in full length. You can always find the playlist on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. The link is in the description of the podcast. Or you can look up The Brain Dispenser on Spotify and Apple Music, and you'll find the playlist, hopefully. And that's all I got for our intro. So let's begin. The first album I wanted to talk about is 13 by none other than Black fucking Sabbath. This is the last album that Black Sabbath did in their career back in, you guessed it, 2013. And I feel like this record just gets looked over criminally. It's an amazing album, and you know, it's that kind of thing that people have going for new bands. I mean, for old bands making new records. It's like they don't give a fuck. Like, why wouldn't you give a fuck, man? These are great bands, you know? And I absolutely hate the fact that, like, it's like, oh, stick to the classics. Like, we don't want to hear new shit. We want to hear Paranoid and Children of the Grave, you know? And it's the same shit with every band from the 70s and 80s that, like, people don't want to hear new music and they just want to hear the classics. And yet you'll ask for a Guns N' Roses album, like, oh, make a new album, Guns N' Roses, what the fuck, it's been 25 years, boo-hoo. Fuck you, man. Who understands you guys? Yeah, so 13 is the last record that they made, and it's a node to the classic Black Sabbath sound. You know, they reunited minus Bill Ward, which is absolutely sad because Bill Ward's drumming in the early Sabbath records is oh, and it's ooh, and it's ah, and it's and it's wow. But he didn't participate in this record because of he claims that they didn't give him a contract that he could sign. There's two sides to every story, but that's fine. We have to respect that. Instead, Brad Wilk from Rage Against the Machine steps in on drums. And I remember watching some videos when this was going to come out, like some behind-the-scenes shit of the making of this record. And he talks about like really trying to do justice to Black Sabbath. And I think he does it quite well. So I don't mind Brett Wilk playing the drums in this record. And like I said, it's a nod to the classic Sabbath albums. It's a mix of everything, from Black Sabbath to Paranoid, Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, what's the other one? Sabotage, which is like the heaviest one they got. in my opinion. Then they went to like Never Say Die and Technical Ecstasy, which was like really weird because it was no longer that sound of doom, but it was still Sabbath. Then the Dio years, then I don't know what the fuck happened. And when this record came out, I was like 14, and my rock and roll soul was so excited, and it was a time where I just wanted to get my hands on everything that I could. And new music from Black Sabbath was like, fuck yeah, dude, I want to hear that. And it did not disappoint. From it kicks off with the 8-minute long end of the beginning and goes into the almost 9-minute long God is Dead, Loner, and it's heavy as fuck. It's got the classic Sabbath riffs. Tony Iommi is amazing. He's a fucking riff machine. He's got like that. Only he could do it. So many guitar players, so many bands that this guy has influenced, and only he can do the riffs the way Tony Iommi does them, with 2 less fingers than the rest of the guitar players trying to replicate his stuff. And I feel like a lot of people say that they ripped themselves off with this one, and it's like a Sabbath, like classic Sabbath cover album, some bullshit that I've read from some old guy on Facebook, who claims he knows it all because he grew up in the 70s listening to classic Sabbath. He can suck a dick. This is an amazing record. I don't care if they ripped themselves off, which I don't think they did. The legend goes that Rick Rubin gave them he sat them down in the studio and told them, like, let's do, and played them the original Black Sabbath album from the 70s when they started out, the one that ignited all. And so that they would get in that musical headspace and try to do that shit. And they did so fantastically. There's also Methodemic. That song is I think it's easily one of the heaviest Sabbath songs. It's such a banger. Geezer Butler comes in with a bass tone that Satan himself would be scared of. That is the bass tone. I think Geezer's bass tone is one of my favorite, if not my favorite bass tone in music, period. And it's incredible how, back in the day he used to use a pick, and now he switched to playing with the fingers, and it sounds even nastier. Yeah, amazing. So I highly encourage you to go check this Sabbath album out. It's the perfect coming full circle for a band that almost single-handedly is responsible for a whole genre that would not exist without them. 13 by Black Sabbath out of 2013. And the next album in our delicious buffet of Christmas leftovers is 12 Bar Blues by Scott Weiland, coming out in 1998. This record came out apparently right after Stone Temple Pilots went on hiatus the previous year in 1997. And Scott Weiland said, fuck it, I'm gonna make a solo record. And I don't think a lot of people know about this one, even like big Stevie fans. Like, this record is really buried in there. And I can see why. And sometimes that reason is that as fans, as a society, we don't know good music when it hits us right in the face. An incredibly diverse album, super experimental, and it's got everything that's good about Scott Weiland. He's an amazing songwriter. Here he really proves that at that point in his career that, he was a genius in his own right. Like, besides the amazing formula that Stone Temple Pilots was, Scott is a genius of his own, and he proves it with this record called 12 Bar Blues, but it's more like 12 bars of everything that you can think of. I've included the songs Barbarella and Cool Kiss in this one, which it's got it all. It's kind of, his 9 Inch Nails moment, his Trent Reznor moment. He experiments with a lot of drum loops, with a lot of samples, with a lot of genres. There's violins, there's heavily distorted, fuzzy, noisy guitars, and it's a lot of things that does not necessarily translate into rock. Even Scott does some beatboxing in here. I'm assuming that he samples that and loops it, and just an incredibly complex record. But it's so easy to enjoy if you have any good musical taste at all. It'll make you want to beat on a box. It'll make you want to do the boogie woogie with your booty. And it'll make you want to make love all at the same time. It is a handful of things to do at the same time. And this record is a handful of genres all put together. And after your significant other is gone, it'll make you want to masturbate and sing a lullaby, just like Scott described in the song Barbarella, which is an amazingly beautiful acoustic ballad, and that has some like electronic drum machine going on, and it's acoustic. So it's like really like it's an experimental record, and then it has a bluesy acoustic breakdown that sort of takes you away from everything, and then it goes back to that kind of electronic vibe. But it's still a rock song, and it's a beautiful, beautiful song. Then we got Cool Kiss, which is like so groovy and so heavy and so sexy. Only the way Scott can make it happen. Cool, cool, kiss, kiss. Keep your hands up off my lips. It's so fucking like, this one makes you want to do it. This one makes you want to get a cool, cool kiss, kiss. Not necessarily on your lips. Oh, yeah. I remember Jimmy Was a Stimulator, track number 9. It's got such a groove, like, Jimmy was a stimulator. And, oh my gosh. And then there's Mockingbird Girl. Is it Mockingbird Girl or Lady, Your Roof Brings Me Down? One of them is an actual 1, 2, 3 waltz. Yes, like a waltz. It's not kind of like a waltz, it's a waltz, with Scott Weiland putting his beautiful poetry all over it. And he really is such a poet. I feel like this guy was such a personal songwriter that when I read his lyrics, not always do I know what he's talking about, but I can tell there is meaning behind what he says, And he's such a talented artist, and this record was so buried in there. I think the next year they went in and did number 4 with STP, which is an absolute banger. But this record, it's kind of buried in there, and nobody really heard of it. And honestly, as diverse as it is, he put some jazz, some blues, some rock, some drum loops, some samples, something of a little bit of everything. I can always play this record, and I feel it in my spirit. It's amazing, and I highly encourage you to listen to this one. 12 Bar Blues by Scott Weiland from 1998. And now I bring you the Neurotic Outsiders, a supergroup formed in 1995, consisting of my favorite Sex Pistol, Steve Jones, Matt Sorum, and Duff McKagan of that band that I can't remember their name, and John Taylor from Duran Duran. So I think they formed because they were playing like a benefit gig at the Viper Room in Los Angeles for the guy who owned Maverick Records, or a producer who was in Maverick, which is Madonna's label. And they did like a charity thing for his son or his daughter who had cancer, and they did a gig at the Viper Room in like '96, which was the first time Duff ever played sober. He talks about this in his autobiography, and he was absolutely freaking out and didn't know if he was going to be able to even perform without having a bus, because all his life he had played drunk pretty much since '85 when GNR first started out. And he talks about how Steve from the Pistols just told him, like, it's okay, you know? And he says that he just absolutely killed it. Although he plays guitar in the Neurotic Outsiders, not bass. The bass duties are left to John Taylor. And they put out this record, self-titled, The Neurotic Outsiders, in 1996. And it's an absolute amazing record. It's so hard for me sometimes to find like this just gritty rock and roll that's super energetic, that's like a lot of riffs and heavy drum beats that make you want to bang your head and make you want to jump and go crazy. That is my shit. That's what turns me on the most. And sometimes it's like I got my set of bands, obviously, that I love, that I can always count on. But sometimes it's like, okay, I want something different. And it's so hard to find something like that. And the Neurotic Outsiders record never fails for me. Amazing. Just most of the songs are written by Steve Jones, an incredibly talented guy. He was really the musical genius of the Sex Pistols. If you haven't checked out his book, Lonely Boy, highly recommend it. He really talks about that creative process, how he and Paul Cook, the drummer, were the main songwriters as far as the music was concerned. I think Steve even wrote some lyrics, although most of them were left to Mr. John Lydon, a.k.a. Johnny Rotten. And here it's like I said, most of it written by Steve Jones. Just, what can I say? It's punk rock as it gets. But it's like a really tight punk rock, unlike a lot of his 80s not predecessors, but the guys who came after him in the 80s, all these punks, who didn't really care if it sounded good. They just wanted to play something. Steve Jones is a guy that actually cares about the music, and he's very, very meticulous about it, and a very, very good guitar player. And this is super tight. Matt Sorum is also like a beast of a drummer. The guy's a machine. And it's a great combination to have these two guys together, because they're both so tight and so like on the beat, and it's just it's so much punch. I love Matt Sorum's drumming as like I said, the guy's a machine. Like, he's perfect every time. But there's also a punch that he's got. He plays with such anger, and this record is angry. It's punk rock. It's rock and roll. Some of the songs written by Duff himself, such as 6 Feet Under, and I think a B-side was included for Seattle Head. However, this record is out of print, so much like a buffet, you can get it all for $9.99 on your favorite music subscription service, or for free if you're the kind of guy that likes to get his music for free. I don't recommend it. Pay the artists. But this record's out of print, so this is the only way you can get it now. 6 Feet Under, Seattle Head, which is a song that Duff originally wrote for his second solo record, Beautiful Disease, which never came out because some label issues, and Duff lost the masters to that, and that record just was made and never saw the light of day. However, it's floating there on YouTube, I think. And Seattle Head's one of my favorite songs. Such a heavy song. One of my favorite songs ever, period. Duff is such an amazing songwriter, an amazing singer. Although the version that they do on this record is a little bit slower, a little bit more polished. I do like Duff's version better, but it's always nice to hear that song in any form. And I love this record top to bottom. Also got the song Union, which is a little bit slower. I think it's about Steve Jones kind of wanting to get a Sex Pistols reunion, or being a little bit nostalgic about the Sex Pistols, you know. The lyrics go, "Tell me, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the sickest Sex Pistol of them all? Is it Johnny Rotten? I don't know. I'd really like to ask him, but he drives me up the wall. Now take old Sidney Vicious, he's a clown. He turned his mother in less than half a crown. But I wish I had a union." There are some, it's real, you know, keeps it real. Steve Jones, such an underrated guy. He even has some solo records that I never heard. But this band is amazing. They only did that record. They did a few shows, like at the Viper Room here and there. They had guests such as Billy Idol come in. It looks like it was just a good old blast, you know. And they stopped in 1997, and that was it. But this record, for me, it always delivers. Great record to just rock the fuck out. I love to put this one when I'm working out, and I do work out. I may be skinny, but I do work out. Just have good genetics. So out of 1996, the Neurotic Outsiders self-titled album, Duff McKagan, Steve Jones, Matt Sorum, and John Taylor, all-star lineup, amazing punk rock record. And now that you're done masturbating and singing a lullaby, I'm going to introduce you to this next record, Sound City Reel to Reel. You may have heard of this documentary, which was produced by Dave Grohl around 2012 or 11, came out in March of 2013. I just watched the documentary the other day. It's amazing. Pays tribute to the legendary Sound City Studios in Van Nuys, California, where so many rock records were made that you got no idea. They show, like, in a really fast clip, all the album covers of all the albums that were made in this studios, and it'll blow your mind. I was like, whoa. You know, anywhere from Fleetwood Mac, Cheap Trick, Tom Petty, Neil Young, Johnny Cash, and then in the 90s, Nirvana did Nevermind in there, Rage Against the Machine, Slipknot, Queens of the Stone Age, just about everybody that you can think of recorded at Sound City, and some of the most epic albums of our time were made that even changed the history and the course of music and rock music forever. It focuses around the Neve soundboard that was purchased in 1974 by the owner of the studios in order to draw in a more elite artists, more big names in the industry, and make better business, right? A soundboard that is like about 1 in 4 made in the entire world. And it was the most custom made one out of all of them, and apparently it sounded absolutely delightful, right? And as it focuses on the story of this board, how this board is responsible for so many of these records, that it's kind of incredible to think all of them came out of the same soundboard, out of the same machine, and it takes a focus on a very nostalgic way of the analog process of making albums, recording to tape. Such a different experience from recording digitally, you know. Fast forward, you know, in circa maybe 2011, 2010, Sound City goes broke. They go bankrupt because they cannot keep up with the digital era. Pro Tools comes out. Everybody's starting to do records digitally, and nobody wants to do analog. It's so much easier with digital. You fuck up one note, you can correct it. You can copy and paste shit and put it there and put it here and make samples and da 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 da. So everything just switched, and it was very different. A lot of the artists are interviewed, including like Stevie Nicks and Tom Petty. May he rest in peace. Even Neil Young. They say like, back in the day you had to play this shit. You couldn't like you wanted to record it, you needed to be able to play it. And with digital, sometimes that is not the case. And you had to practice back then. You had to practice. They tracked a lot of these records live, all at the same time in the same room, and it was such an amazing experience. It almost makes me sad. I haven't even ever been in a recording studio, but it makes me sad that it's not done analog anymore. So as the studio goes broke, none other than Dave Grohl buys the soundboard, and he brings it into his own studio 606 in LA, and decides to recruit all these artists that he tries to get in the documentary, which is just a little bit of the all-star lineup that recorded at Sound City throughout the 3 decades, since 74 all the way to the 90s, early 2000s. So this is more of a tribute for the studio and the process of recording to tape. And he brings in anybody from Stevie Nicks to Ricky Springfield, to Corey Taylor, Joshua Homme, Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick, and Paul McCartney. So it's an all-star lineup, and somehow it's very diverse, but it all blends together very well. It was supposed to be the soundtrack of the record, of the documentary, but I don't know if it serves as a soundtrack. It's more like an accompaniment to the documentary, and it's a great release, man. Anytime you got Stevie Nicks, Corey Taylor, Dave Grohl, and Paul McCartney on the same album, I feel like you gotta listen to that shit, don't you? And it got very bad critics. I was reading about it. It's like, oh, Dave Grohl tried to do this and like he failed. Like, and it's a sloppy record. It's kind of lousy. It doesn't sound like Sound City. There's a song "You Can't Fix This" with Stevie Nicks where they try to go for that like ran-on sound, classic Fleetwood Mac, and that song got like, oh, like that was an epic fail. Like that was like just a pathetic attempt to recreate Fleetwood Mac. It's not, man. It's a different song. That's it. With Stevie Nicks singing on it, of course, it's gonna sound like Fleetwood Mac in some way, and. We also got Brad Wilk and Tim Comfort from Rage Against the Machine, who also recorded some of their most popular records at Sound City. And the documentary is so amazing as the second part or the last part of it goes into the process of making this record. And I just love it. I'm seeing Josh Homme and Dave Grohl and Trent Reznor in the studio making the song Mantra. And looking at these guys that I admire so much and going into their creative process for just a few minutes, it's like a kid watching cotton candy being made, just looking at Josh telling like, oh, so here we need to build it up, and it's like, boom, and it cuts there. And Trent is like, I never think of it like that consciously, but I really do, I never like thinking about song structure and just looking at them go. And then Trent is like, I think like we need a bass here because Josh is just playing guitar, and then it's like, oh, think we need a bass, and then Trent grabs the bass and then he hands it over to Josh, and it's amazing, man. For a musical nerd like me, that is just wow, it's like going to the chocolate factory with Willy Wonka. And every song in this record is really great. The reason it got bad reviews was because a lot of the songs are really put together on the spot. It says here it was recorded just in November 2 and 3 in 2011 at Studio 606. So it was recorded in 2 days. That's pretty impressive to be able to bring in all these guys in 2 days. maybe that's not accurate, but it's certainly something that they put on the spot. They also show how Paul McCartney comes in with Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl playing on the song Cut Me Some Slack. And Paul just comes in and he's like, okay, so we don't know what we're doing, right? But we're doing it. And they just write a song right there and record it. Amazing. So some of it's like a little bit not very well polished songwriting wise, so it's more like of a jam, a lot of songs that were put together on the spot, but it's such an amazing group of musicians that, you know, something great came out of it. And I love the sound. I feel like everybody could get into this no matter what style of rock you like. There's even a punk rock song with Lee Ving from Fear that it sounds like an 80s punk rock song. It's called Your Wife Is Calling. You Can Fix This from Stevie Nicks, which is like the Fleetwood Mac-ish song. Cut Me Some Slack with Paul McCartney, which is literally a Nirvana / Beatles mashup. Amazing. And Mantra with Dave Grohl, Homme, and Josh Homme and Tristan Reznor. What an all-star lineup of musical gods from the modern era. You know, the reason they brought in Trent, he did with Teeth at Sound City. And Trent is supposed to represent kind of the digital era, and that's why this record ends with Mantra, because Trent was really the guy who used the digital tools to his advantage, and rather than trying to recreate the original thing, trying to recreate the real thing, he used the tools to manipulate sounds in ways that you never could do it on tape. Really taking advantage of it rather than, you know, sort of what's the word, like slagging off, you know, from trying to make real music, from trying to play real instruments. So in the documentary, you're going to see Trent and Josh and Dave in the studio, and Trent is with his laptop using all these plugins and making crazy sounds while he's playing piano, of course. Of course, this song is made to tape as well, but it's kind of the mashup of the digital era coming to replace tape, as the chorus just goes on forever. It's a really long song. It's like about 8 minutes long, super progressive, but interesting. Every minute of it is really interesting, and it draws you in. And the chorus goes like, and all of this will never be the same again, and all of this will never be the same again. So, you know, whatever style of music that you're into, whatever style of rock that you're into, I feel like Sound City is something that anybody could enjoy. It's a record made, I guess, kind of by music fans for music fans. So if you're a musical nerd like me, you could totally get into this. Whether you choose to watch a documentary or not, that's up to you. I do recommend watching the documentary, but you can actually have one without the other. I listened to the record a couple times before even watching it, and I loved it, and I enjoyed it so much. Strong songwriting, strong playing, amazing production, and it's a pure analog magic happening, which is not done very often nowadays. So go check it out, the album Sound City Reel to Reel. And the last album, the last course in our buffet of Christmas leftovers is Believe in Me by Duff McKagan. Once again, I bring you some Duff into the mix. This record he made right after GNR finished the 3-year-long Use Your Illusion tour, and Duff was just about fucked up beyond his mind. And this record is his like almost last attempt at getting better and proving something to himself. You can watch a video that there is on like a late night performance where he does a title track, Believe in Me. He looks terrible, man. He looks terrible. But he put out, regardless, a very, very good album that is super rock and roll. It's heavy, it's GNR, put a little more punk edge to it. Slash, Matt Sorum, Dizzy Reed, Gilby Clarke, they all do some sort of playing in this record. So it's really, it's really cool. Slash plays in the songs Believe in Me and Just Not There. He's got even the majority with Lenny Kravitz, of course. Man in the Meadow with Wester Keane, who's the guy who co-wrote It's So Easy. Jeff Beck, Sebastian Bach. So everybody's here. Everybody's here. An amazing record that shows a lot of struggle, a lot of like trying to get better from, and a guy who's really lost and doesn't know how. I remember also in his book, he talks about touring this record, and he had to cancel the tour about 2 or 3 shows in because he just couldn't do it anymore. He was so deep in his alcoholism that he was barely functional anymore. And after that, he went back to his home in Seattle and almost died. And that's when the story about his pancreas almost exploding, if you follow Duff, you've heard that story time and time again. But I really like this record. It's really heavy, much in, like I said, I like gritty riff guitars. Riff guitars, what am I even talking about? I like heavy, gritty music, heavy riffs, bang your head, jump around, fuck shit up. And this record is another one that never fails for me. Man in the Meadow is kind of reminiscent of that rhythm section. It's kind of got the same groove that a lot of the songs in Use Your Illusion have. I wonder why that is. And Slash playing in Believe in Me, that's a Slash and Duff song. What else could you ask for? I remember he also wanted to kind of be like Prince and do his record with like playing all the instruments by himself. Duff is a huge Prince fan, in case you didn't know that. And this was like his first attempt in trying to make a record all by himself, playing every instrument on it. Obviously, he's got a bunch of collaborations here and there, but wherever there's not a collaboration, he played the rest of the instruments. He also was a drummer for 7 years before joining Guns N' Roses. So Duff is an incredibly talented musician, and I really love his music. He's one of the songwriters that I, as a songwriter and as a musician, can relate to the most. I can immediately understand what he's doing and where he's coming from, and I love it. I can rock out so hard to Duff every time. Punk Rock Song, another one out of here. An incredible 1 minute and 37 seconds of pure LA punk for your soul, man. It also has the song Lonely Tonight, which closes. And it's actually like a cabaret blues song. It's like a jazzy cabaret blues song. It's not kind of like, it is that. It's a perfect closing. I love every song in this record. Believe in Me, Man in the Meadow, the punk rock song. I can talk about this apparently not forever because I'm running out of words, but check it out for yourself and you'll know what I'm talking about. And I included Man in the Meadow and Believe in Me to finish off our underrated albums playlist. So I hope that you have enjoyed the meal that I prepared for you this week. Digested 5 records. You can listen to them in 5 days, or in 1 day, or in 10 days, however you prefer. But I do encourage you to check them all out. And that has been it for another episode of the Brain Dispenser. Did you notice that I'm drunk doing this episode? Because you might have. I talk a lot, don't I? That's the reason I started a podcast. Remember, you can check out The Brain Dispenser on Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Facebook, YouTube. Oh yeah, I'm drunk. And what I intended to say was to check out the playlist that I put together with all these records. A couple songs out of each, so you can get what all of them are all about. So to sum it up, we got 13 by Black Sabbath, Cool Kiss by Scott Weiland, Neurotic Outsiders, self-titled, Sound City Real to Real by a bunch of amazing, talented artists featuring Dave Grohl in every song, and Duff McKagan, Believe in Me. That's our buffet of leftovers that we got. Check it out on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Link is in the description of the podcast, or you can just look up Underrated Albums, The Brain Dispenser, on your favorite music platform, and add that playlist to your music library, and check all of these records out because they are fantastic. So, yeah, I'm gonna finish off this ginger ale that doesn't have whiskey in it anymore, and I am gonna send you on your way. I love you. I am your host, Steve Guns. Remember to follow me on Instagram and follow the Brain Dispenser on Instagram at Steve Guns with a double N at the Brain Dispenser. And subscribe. Tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your dad, tell your sugar daddy, tell your sugar mommy. If you got a sugar mommy, kudos to you. Good night.